Have you ever wondered what would actually happen if you did that one thing that scares the shit out of you? Yeah, I had that one thing that had been rattling around in my brain for over 20 years, and I actually did it. And it turned out, and it was awesome. I'm going to tell you the story of one thing that I did that scared me to death, and I faced my fears and I conquered it. Let's dive in.
You're listening to the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast, where we invite you to check your ego at the app, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready to dive into all things real estate marketing, social media, friendship, hardship, love, money mindset, and all the things that celebrate you as a badass boss babe.
We're here to encourage you, show up for you, give you a loving kick in the pants when you need it most, and be your soft place to land on the hardest of days. So pull up a seat at our table and get ready to be inspired and start living your best life by design.
Welcome to the Girl Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast. We are so excited you're here.
Okay, girls, let's dive in. Hey, Bus Bench babes, Beth here doing a solo episode, and I'm talking about something that what would happen if you did that one thing that scared the crap out of you? Like, really, what would happen? And how could your life change for the better? I'm going to tell you a story about something that I've been putting off for a really long time, and the crazy things that have come out of it since then. So let's fast forward, or let's like hit the rewind button. 20 plus years ago, I have a friend named Blake. I'm still friends with Blake to this day. And years ago, Blake and I used to meet for lunch like once a quarter, and we would just catch up on life. And he was a young attorney, and I was a young mortgage gal, and we were just it wasn't a romantic thing. It was just like we were just sort of like besties and just talked about everything under the sun. And I always made him laugh. So Blake said, I think you should do stand-up comedy. I'm like, yeah, I don't think that I could ever do anything like that. And he's like, you are so funny. And he's like, promise me one day you'll consider it. I'm like, I'll consider it, but that sounds like that's way out of my wheelhouse. And I think about like times when I've had to do public speaking over the years, and I always get really, really nervous. I remember speech class. I went to Fourth Baptist, and Ms. Underbaki, she was not married. Miss Underbaki was our English teacher, and she was just like the toughest little old battle axe you've ever met. And I remember like having to get up and give a speech, and it was about something personal, and I cried, and I was like, this is the most embarrassing thing. And I was so emotional, and just like thinking about it now makes me emotional. And I feel like anytime I have to get up and talk about like something really personal, it makes me super emotional. And like you guys know, if you've been following along on this podcast, I cry on this podcast pretty regularly. And I like so then the thought of like standing up and doing like stand-up comedy, I'm like, I would make people laugh. I'd probably get up there and start crying, for crying out loud. I'm like, no way I could ever do that. And I just, public speaking, it's something that deep down I've always wanted to do. And I love making people laugh. Like that is, I don't know. It just makes me feel good when I can make people laugh, because I think it really like takes people's guard down. And especially if you're like sort of poking fun at yourself about something that was maybe funny that happened to you, then people are like, oh, you're actually real, and you're, maybe not like as put together as I thought you were. So yeah, making people laugh is just really something that's important to me. But even a few years ago, I met Cheryl on the team and Carrie on the team at Rotary. But when I joined Rotary, one of the things they have you do is called a vocational talk. So, vocational talk is a talk about your work, right? And it's actually like a little mini bio talk about your life. So you get up and you have like 10 minutes to just tell people about yourself, and you can do a slide presentation. I didn't do a slide presentation. I didn't do any of that. I just got up and sort of winged it and had some talking points. But I again got emotional and cried. I remember I was in the winter carnival and had to do some sort of speaking thing there. Again, cried. And I'm like, there's just no way. Like I don't know, maybe need to go to a public speaking coach or something. And people always relate to the tears. You know, there's always someone that comes up to me afterwards. So after my vocational talk, when I got emotional, I wasn't like bawling or anything, but I got choked up. And I'm like, I'm in a room full of people and it's mainly men and they're all like retired guys and they don't know me from the man in the moon. But right after I did that, Carrie, who now is operations manager on the team, came up to me and she's like, I want to be friends with you. And I'm like, oh my God. And so I went home and I'm like, Mark, I just made a new friend. So, you know, obviously the tears are not like something that I just turn on the waterworks. It's just like, I feel like when I'm talking about like really deeply personal things, that then that strikes a chord and it makes me emotional. So I'm like, there's no way in hell I could do anything with stand up comedy. But it's something that always rattled around in the back of my head. I'm like, well, what if? I don't know. And I have mentioned it to just a couple of people in passing over the years and have not done anything with it. So fast forward 20 years to last fall. Last fall, I was with my girlfriend and we had gone to a yoga class and we're driving home and just like talking about life. And she had survived cancer and, you know, just like a lot of big life things. And I got, and I'm going to get emotional again. I just got really vulnerable with her. And I just said, I'm not really feeling creative in my life. I'm like, I love what I do. I love problem solving for clients. You know, I think a lot of people think that like putting out the podcast is creative, but like, I feel like that's something that we've mastered now that we're, you know, like we're starting our fourth year with the podcast. So I feel like that's something like that's easy now. And I was painting, a while back and like I've done so many creative things over the years, but I feel like once that creative bucket gets filled, then it's not fulfilling anymore. So I just got real vulnerable with my girlfriend. And I'm like, I'm not feeling creative like I want to be. And I said, I don't even know what it looks like, but I'm like really feeling like I'm stuck. And gosh, I wasn't thinking that this episode was going to be that emotional. And Carrie was going to stay in the office when I recorded this. And so I'm kind of glad she's not in here now. And my girlfriend said, what about that stand-up comedy thing that you talked about years ago? And I'm like, I'm like, what about it? And she goes, why don't you do something with that? And I go, what would I do with that? And she goes, why don't you go take a class? And I'm like, what? And I said, that wasn't even on my radar. And she's like, I don't even know where to take a class. And she's like, Google it. She goes, you have a stand-up. She goes, you have a comedy club like a mile from your house, which I do. I do. So I'm like, all right, I'll look into that. I don't know why I was like so like dumbfounded, like never even occurred to me because that was so far off my radar. I got home and Googled it. Sure enough, there was a stand-up comedy class starting in 2 weeks. And so I talked to Mark about it and I said, hey, I'm thinking about taking a stand-up comedy class. And he's like, you should go do it. That would be great. And I said, well, the problem is that all the stuff that I would talk about is poking fun at you. I said, are you okay with that? And he's like, sure. Yep, that's fine. So I signed up for this stand-up comedy class. It was a 4-week class and it was 4 Mondays in a row. And then they said there was going to be like a recital at the end or something, kind of like a piano recital, I guess. And so I get there the first week and there's, I don't know, 10 or 11 people or something in the class. And it's like a, 5-minute drive from my house. Super easy. And, the instructor is kind of like this quirky comedian guy and goes through about like, we get handouts every week and they were super old school. They were literally like handwritten handouts, not even typed up handouts. But it was all about like how to structure a joke and how to mine, they call it mining, and mining for comedy bits. Like how do you mine the funny out of a story or funny subjects or subjects that would like strike a chord with people. Like, how do you do all of that? And so we were just kind of going through some of that. And there wasn't even really any like get to know you. You just kind of went around, said your name and like what you do for a living type thing, or just like say something about yourself. And so then he's like, gives us all a bathroom break. And he goes, when we come back from the bathroom break, everyone is going to take turns and get up for, you have to talk for at least a minute in front of the class. And he's like, you can talk about anything you want. I'm like, shit. I'm one of those people that I really like to be prepared for things. I really like to know what's coming down the pike. I don't like surprise parties, even though people keep throwing me surprise parties. Like, I don't like that sort of thing. And so I'm like, well, great. What the hell am I going to talk about? So I'm in the bathroom, like having a nervous breakdown, trying to figure out, like, okay, well, this is a stand-up comedy thing, so it probably should be something that's funny. Well, so many of my funny stories that I have are real estate related. And that's the part that's really tricky, is that I have a code of ethics that I have to follow. So all of the code of ethics expire after a real estate transaction. They all go away after a real estate transaction, except for confidentiality. So I can't all of a sudden say, oh, Bob and Sue Anderson had this happen on their transaction. Like, I couldn't do that. I would get sued and probably lose my real estate license and get thrown in real estate jail. So I'm like, I can't all of a sudden have my stand-up comedy be like a real estate thing, because I don't know, some stories are so specific, people would absolutely know I was talking about them. But I did have a real estate story to talk about. I finally like pulled one idea out of my butt. And I told the story about, I'd met an online lead, this nice gal, and she and her husband lived in the area close to my brokerage. And they were thinking about selling their house, and they really wanted to get a lake property. They had adult grown kids, but now their kids were coming back with grandkids, and they really wanted a lake home. So we had seen stuff like around my office, but they just said that was not really affordable. So then we're like, okay, let's go out and look out a ways. So we're like an hour outside of the cities, and we were in a part of town where, let's just call a spade a spade. A lot of agents are terrible with their marketing. They, have had properties like listed for, and this, keep in mind, this was a long time ago. This was like 10 years ago. Signs would fall down and they wouldn't put signs up. They would have terrible directionals. And even like the instructions online about how to get to a property were not super clear. So a lot of it was just like a little, it felt like a game of like hide and seek where you're trying to find a house. So she and I get to a property, and we met there and go up to the door, and the lockbox wasn't where it said it was supposed to be. I'm like, well, that's weird. But that happens pretty regularly, where someone in the office, the agent puts the lockbox, on the hose spigot, and in the instructions, it says it's going to be on the front door. So that happens all the time, where you get to the house and then you're on this little treasure hunt trying to find the lockbox so you can get into the house. Couldn't find the lockbox. And so I just rattled the doorknob and hollered. I'm like, hey, real estate agent. And the door was unlocked. And so we just went in. So this buyer and I are touring around this house and looking at it. And it's also that part of town where not everybody's house was like show ready. And you weren't even surprised by the fact that stuff wasn't show ready. So we're walking around this house. It wasn't show ready. It didn't look that great. And I'm like, gosh, the description just seems really off. I'm like, this isn't what I was expecting on this property, because we had both looked at it online. But the photos were really subpar in general. Then I'm like, I don't know. I mean, honestly, we're in this house for at least 30 minutes until we figured out that it wasn't the house. It was not the house. The house we were touring, in fact, wasn't even for sale. So we're touring a house and I'm like, oh my God, we're in the middle of nowhere. All I can see is like some, a redneck dude showing up with a shotgun and like chasing us off of his property. And so I'm like, we got to get the heck out of here. So we, booked out of there, try to leave things how we found it. And I get in my car and realize I had left my business card on the counter. And I'm like, shit. So I'm like, hang on. I'm like, I raced back in and got my business card. That's all I needed was them calling my brokerage saying, hey, like you unlawfully entered a property and you were trespassing. And then, of course, the house that we wanted to see was like 2 houses down. But the directions were terrible. And they led us directly to the house that we toured. So I told that story and everyone laughed and were like, oh my God. And the one girl in the front, she's like, no, 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 I know where this story's going. No, you did not. And so it was funny. But then every week we had to come up with like a little bit of a bit. Like, what are you going to talk about? Like, so week 1, we had to get up and talk for a minute. Week 2, you had to get up and talk for, I think, 2 minutes about something. But then that's when we are starting to build our stand up routine. And then by the end of the 4th week, you basically had refined like a stand up comedy routine. And you had to get up every single week and say it in front of your peers or now sort of like your friends from your class. And then they had a recital. So it was like a piano recital, and you had to invite your friends and family. And so I invited everybody. I'm like, why not? The more, the merrier. And it's so interesting because I feel like stand-up comedy is so subjective. Some people talk like about real stories. Some people just do like fast little like one-liners. Some people are storytellers with funny bits to it. Some people like make up stuff that isn't even really a thing. So everybody in the class had totally different methods and styles. And that also made it really cool because you're getting to know these people, and then you could tell if it was like a real story that happened to them or not, and like how they really like played it up. So it was really fun. My instructor had me be the headliner, and that kind of told me that he maybe thought I was the funniest in the class. But I also probably drew the biggest crowd. I had a ton of people there supporting and cheering me on, which was really, really fun. And the day of my recital, I was really nervous. I had brunch scheduled with a girlfriend for her birthday, and that was a really good distraction. But I had been practicing my bit, and I had my little note cards. And then I went to the brunch, and I had to leave directly from the brunch to go to the comedy club. And we're back in the green room, and like I'm just kind of going through my flashcards, and I was so nervous. Like my tummy hurt nervous. And I'm like, oh God, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. And I'm gonna get up there and my mouth is gonna be so dry and it's gonna be like chalk. And oh my God, I was really nervous. I tried to just like breathe through, and I'm like, okay, your bit. Like, where to like put the, inflections to like, and where to slow down. Like I knew all the things about how to like have a good delivery. But then it's also a little bit nerve wracking when everyone goes in front of you, and I don't know. It was a lot. And you're watching all your friends just sort of from the sidelines. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now it's my turn. But the craziest thing happened. I got up on stage and I instantly felt calm. I don't even know how or why. I don't even know like what that was about. I was not talking about like personal stuff that was so personal it made me cry. I did not cry. I didn't even feel like crying. And I nailed it. I literally nailed it. It was so much fun. And now I see why and how like people are stand-up comedians or public speakers. You just sort of like feed off the energy of the crowd. And Carrie from the team, Carrie recorded it, which was really funny. But she said if I would have done things differently, she's like, I would have had a second camera on Mark, because she goes, he was laughing so hard, his face was beet red. She was like, he was roaring with laughter the entire time. And then afterwards, everybody, like, of course, all my people that were there supporting me are like, oh my God, we had no idea you were that funny, and holy cow, that was so great. But then my other classmates, like their friends and family were coming up saying the same thing. And I was like, oh my gosh. But then the craziest thing happened. I almost had like an adrenaline dump. And I've heard of it happening before, but I've never had one happen to me. Because when I got done, I was just like, I don't know, I was like drained. And I felt like I was going to throw up. My stomach hurt so bad. And I'm like, I think it was all the adrenaline that had built up. And then I'm up on stage and did my thing. And then afterwards, it just like, it was so weird. It felt like, it's hard to describe. I felt like I was like sort of like in this alternate universe type thing where like I wasn't really here, but I was sort of like watching myself from like a higher vantage point. And my tummy hurt for like an hour, but it was like that nervous energy hurt. And we had gone and grabbed a bite to eat with a bunch of the people. I said, hey, just come over. And then, I bought a couple rounds of appetizers and drinks for everybody for supporting me. And all of a sudden it's all subsided. It was really weird. Like that adrenaline. So I don't know. That's sort of totally besides the point of this story. But that was a really weird thing that I've never had happen to me before, and I've never had it happen since. But then the great thing is that the very next day I got an email from the comedy club and they said, you did such an awesome job. We are wondering if we can have you back in a month or so for a paid gig to be part of the lineup for a stand-up comedy show on Sunday, January, I think it was January 29th, or I'm sorry, December 29th. So it was that week between Christmas and New Year's. And I'm like, sure, yeah. But then they're like, you need to make your bit a little bit longer. So then I did it again, but I did it with actual stand-up comedians, which was cool. I think I was the only one from class that they reached out to because none of my other classmates were there for that. But it was comedians from all over the Twin Cities and then like a really big headliner that draws a big crowd. And it was a sold out show. So that was so cool. And now I haven't done anything with it since. And now everybody keeps asking, like, when's your next show? Oh my gosh, I wish I would have known you were doing this. I think people are really surprised that I did this. And people are like, well, you're really funny. So, like, I can see you doing that. But I think people think, like, getting up to do that seems like something that's really scary or really hard. And it felt scary at the time. But then now that I've done it, it doesn't feel scary. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So like, I don't know what that's going to come from down the road, but hopefully eventually some speaking engagements where I can incorporate some funny stuff into it to make people laugh and to really like bring value and educate people and help people that that's my big why in life is to create a bigger life for myself and those I love. So I don't know what's going to come of it, but it was one of those things that have been rattling around in my brain for 20 years. And I can't believe that, I don't know. And I don't think I would have done it had I not like been vulnerable with my girlfriend. Her reminded me about that thing from like years and years ago and me actually acting upon it if I would have ever done anything with it. And I feel like it was one of those things. It was like, God, it was not easy. It was not easy. And there were plenty of people from the first class of our 4-week class that didn't come back for week 2 through 4. So, and I asked my instructor, I'm like, why do you think we had like 4 people drop out? And I'm like, why do you think that is? And he goes, because once people get a taste of what it takes to get up on stage, he goes, a lot of people just don't have it in them to do it. And I'm like, that's really interesting because especially there was a girl in our class that was really funny. She would have been great, but she just vanished. And the instructor, I'm like, well, do you call them and try to get them back? And he's like, nope. He goes, we just don't do that. He's like, this is just more than some people are willing to do. And he's like, it just pushes people's comfort level too much. So that was really interesting. So I feel really proud of myself for sticking with the class, for crushing it on my 2 comedy gigs that I've done so far. And I don't know, but I'm going to take those skills that I learned at that class and how to mine funny information and funny details out of a story. And we'll see where it shows up future, what in my life down the road. But I don't know. I guess the moral of the story of this podcast is if there's something that you've been avoiding, or maybe something that you have wanted to do, but you're scared, or that thing is just like terrifying, or you think that you wouldn't be good at it, or that it wouldn't be received well, or all those stories that you tell yourself, tell the drunk monkey to shut up and just go do it. See what could happen from it. You're going to learn things about yourself that you didn't know before. You might learn that you actually love it. You might learn that you don't love it, but you also will just learn more things about yourself. And maybe you'll find a new creative passion that will just light a fire and be that spark to encourage you to do other hard things in life. So I hope you got a good little chuckle out of my story. If you ever want to hear my stand-up routine, we could send you a link to it. So reach out, shoot me a DM, and I'd be happy to send you my link for my first comedy show. It's kind of funny, and I am poking fun at my husband, but he thought I was hysterical and he laughed his ass off the whole time. So maybe you could relate to my marriage stories also. So until next time, bus bench babes, keep your face off a bus bench and keep being the badass boss babe that you are.
Okay, girls, are you feeling as inspired as we are? We're over here cheering you on because you just finished another episode of the Girl, Get Your Face Off a Bus Bench podcast.
If you want more, head over to girlgetyourfaceoffabusbench.com for show notes and more episodes. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. They mean the world to us, and they're what keep us going.
Girl, thanks for being here.